Uh, the uh, the reality for me is I love this space. I am constantly looking as a buyer. I'm a coach to small business owners who want to sell or those that want to buy. So excited to participate and look forward to talking with you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Really, really happy you're here and excited to dig into this. So, before we get started, just want to go through a couple housekeeping items. First, we always advise to seek professional advice, as each transaction is unique and circumstances, always vary. So see this workshop as just general guidance. Also, as you can see, all the participants are muted. We're going to keep it that way to avoid any sort of interruptions. But at the end, we're going to have an opportunity to do a nice Q&A and get all those pressing questions answered. So before all our workshops, I always like to look at, the type of people registering, and I like to acknowledge the type of buyers that we have listening in. And it always inspires me because the micro market, in my opinion, is such a special place. It's packed with so many opportunities to really find your passion and love what you do and make great money. And our goal at buyandsellbusiness.com is really to build a better future and strengthen our economy. And we truly believe that starts and finishes with the transition of small businesses and franchises, the businesses that create the fabric of our communities across our nations. So kudos for you for joining in and keeping them not only open, but thriving as these businesses continue to create jobs and service their customers. And if you noticed, I said nations because Mike Finger is actually from the US, and we have a lot of people from the US listening in on Zoom and Twitter. So I'm glad we're having this cross-border conversation. So the first question that was asked during registration is, why are you looking to buy an existing business? The leading answer was to be an entrepreneur. And I think, everyone knows that typical entrepreneurial story. Some kid in college identifies an opportunity, builds it in his or her garage, and they become a billionaire. That doesn't have to be your story. Entrepreneurship through acquisition is such a great example of how people are taking control of their lives, living on their own terms, and being entrepreneurial by finding established lifestyle businesses that they can grow. The next question we asked was, what's your budget? Leading answer was about 250,000, which makes sense, especially in the micro market. We have listings for as little as $1,000 to up to 5 million, but that sweet spot is really anywhere from 200 to 400,000. The next question was, what sector are you interested in? And the leading answer was retail, and the top three finished off with restaurants and food services. And then I believe it looks like there's almost a tie between healthcare and manufacturing. So what are we going to be chatting about today? So first, I'm going to go through why would someone buy a business or franchise, what to look for when buying a business. Then I'll touch base on the general process for buying a business, the importance of communication and expectations. And then I'll finish off my first portion by going over why do businesses fail after being acquired. Then I'll hand it off to Mike. He'll do his presentation, which I'm really excited for. And then I'll end it off with some data stories, success stories, and then we'll enter our Q&A. So why do people buy existing businesses or franchises? There are multiple reasons why someone would buy an existing business or even a franchise. For example, you have access to an existing customer base. You have access to a turnkey operation. You have access to a proven market, and you have the ability to really ride the wave of a business with a great reputation. However, we like to simplify it into three main areas. The first is there's less risk. There's less risk buying an established business versus starting it. And the main reason is it's established. There's market fit, money is being made. The next is there's a shorter ROI, so a shorter return on investment. You're putting money into purchasing an existing business and you're generating return right away, hopefully. And once again, it's because you have access to a living, breathing, money-making business that you have to nurture and grow versus the lag time that a startup can present in the pre-revenue stages. And last, and most importantly, is you have impact. You have existing relationships with clients, employees, suppliers, and all sorts of stakeholders. And to me, I think that's such a great motivator. So the next is, what do you want to look for when buying an existing business or franchise? And once again, we like to break things down into three here. The first is timing, the second is business model, and the third is self-sufficient. And I think, at the end of the day, the biggest thing that people build, or at least focus on building, are valuable and profitable businesses, but not sellable businesses. And there's a major difference. And over the past 7 years, we've been able to identify, three pillars to creating a sellable and valuable business, something that every buyer should be searching for. So what do all these have in common? If you're thinking right now, bad timing, you're absolutely right. As a buyer, you need to identify trends and ensure that timing's on your side. You need to know when to buy and when not to buy based on something that we like to call SET. And that's an internal model we use to audit the business environment. It really questions things like social trends, economic trends, and tech trends. And most importantly, it reminds you that, you're not buying the business for today, you're buying it for future opportunities. So for example, if you're looking to buy a taxi company, due to innovation and shifting consumer behaviors, that space has been disrupted. So your time may have passed and the valuation or opportunity provided with a taxi company may be very limited. The truth is, markets change, consumers change, and technology changes, all of which could hurt or boost the valuation and opportunities of businesses within certain sectors. In addition to timing, you really need to focus on ensuring the business is unique and the market size is big. This is what you need if you want to devote your life to building a great business. So let's chat about the first one here, or the second one here now, the business model. You want to focus on finding a business that is profitable and growing and has recurring revenue year over year. And that revenue should also be diversified to mitigate risk. You also want to ensure that financials are up to date and organized and prepared properly. And the last thing you want to at least acknowledge is that most buyers, or most sellers should provide you with at least 3 to 5 years of financials in order to apply some sort of normalized projections. And believe it or not, the valuation will really be based on the financials more than anything else. But you really want to consider that. And once again, as a buyer, you need to understand that you're not buying the business for today, you're buying it for future opportunities. So you really need to question the financials and the business model to ensure that they can be upheld for the foreseeable future. And you want the seller to be crystal clear on the future opportunities within your industry as well. Last, and my favorite, it's a pretty popular pillar as well. We call it the self-sufficient business. It's also known as the Switzerland structure. And basically, you want to find a business that's not dependent on one leader, one employee, one supplier, one customer. And I think, the reason is, no buyer wants to enter a business with so many unknowns or the fear of losing, that big client or that big supplier that could jeopardize the business. The concept sounds pretty easy and straightforward. However, many business owners disregard it. And through my experience, less dependency in business operations equals a more valuable and sellable business. And as a leader, if you're not replaceable, then you're truly a liability. So you really need to work on developing principles and processes and core values that will allow your team to operate and make decisions without you. Now, what happens when all three of these pillars intersect? First, we see that the business is seamless due to the fact that the seller had perfect timing and showcased a business that is self-sufficient. Therefore, any business savvy person can really walk in and operate that business. Next, the business is sustainable due to the fact that the seller created a business that is self-sufficient and has healthy recurring revenues, meaning the traction to date can be upheld for the foreseeable future. Next, the business has growth and upside due to the fact that the seller created a business that has healthy recurring revenue and the timing's right. Therefore, a new buyer now has the opportunities to take advantage of those positive trends in that space. And when we mention trends, we're really laser focused on that set model. So social trends, economic trends, and tech trends. Now, what I like to go through is just the general process for buying a business. And whether you're using a broker or you have an acquisition team on hand, and we define an acquisition team on hand as an accountant, lawyer, or banker, or you're looking to buy on your own, the general process is pretty consistent. You first want to find businesses or franchises for sale, so your search, and this is where our marketplace comes into play. As far as finding businesses and franchises for sale, listings or opportunities that really suit your lifestyle, suit your skill set, something that really aligns with your goals and objectives in life. We have listings from every sector from across Canada, in some states in the US, with selling prices between 1,000 to 5 million. Next, you want to understand what that business is worth. And this is basically, you want to calculate the most probable selling price. And that's an estimate of value based on a variety of factors, including financial records, tax returns, inventories, payables, and contracts. Buyandsellbusiness.com does have some free tools that can help with this as well. Next is the buyer screening stage. That's where the seller will want to screen you as a buyer to ensure that your offer is valid and that you're a qualified buyer. Next, you're going to enter the offers and negotiation stage. This is when you'll send a letter of intent or an engagement letter. The LOI is basically your written proposal, and it outlines a price and the terms. And the purpose of the document is really to lay out the fundamental terms and officially declare that the negotiations can begin. Now, the thing with the LOI is it's non-binding, which means it does not actually legally commit you to follow through with the terms. Once again, if you're looking for an LOI template, we have those as well. So just reach out to us and we could send it your way. Next is the due diligence stage. And this is the process when you have the opportunity to examine all the financial records and documents. For example, if there's a lease involved, you and your lawyer would verify the details, including measurements, insurance, the market, and the lease agreement. Next, a review of that purchase agreement will occur where lawyers from both the buyer and seller agree on final terms of the sale and closing. And then next, and is the most exciting and rewarding part of the entire process, it's closing. And this marks the completion of the sale. Some deals will come with a transition period in which the new owner requires the previous owner to stay on board and transition the business. And this could be as little as 3 months to as long as 12 months, but it really depends on the size of the business. Now let's get into the next slide here, and let's chat about communication. So you found this perfect business to buy. What's important? In my opinion, it's communication. It's crucial that family is aware of your plan to purchase a business or franchise. Communication and transparency is critical to buying, as it can be a benefit or a deterrent to buying effectively and efficiently, as everyone in your family is involved with this lifestyle change. Entrepreneurship and business ownership is messy, and there's no denying that. Everyone around you is coming on to this trip, and aside from your stakeholders, there's a lot of other people who end up mattering a lot. So, with that said, there are tons of benefits for buying a business or franchise. However, there are still challenges and sacrifices emotionally and financially while operating and growing a business that could affect everyone directly or indirectly involved with that business. So I think being aware of that and ensuring that everyone in your family or anyone involved understands that is key to having a prosperous business and life. And the truth is, and I believe Jeff Bezos is the one that mentioned this, but the truth is, if you're happy at home, you'll be happy at work. And if you're happy at work, you'll be happy at home. So you really need to find that work-life harmony. And in my opinion, it starts with communication. So now I like to touch base on expectations. So let's lay that out for the buy journey. So during the process of connecting with a seller, you need to understand that it's a process. It's not an event, and you really have to love that process. You need to understand that a lot of time and money will go into that search journey, and that a potential seller is not always looking to sell to the highest offer, but rather to a seller that suits the business or franchise and has the ability to carry on the legacy. Let's not forget, and let's step back here for a moment. This is either the first or second biggest asset a person has in their life. So it's extremely important. And a study from Harvard Business School estimated that a typical price tag on a buyer's search for a business can be anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million in lost time, wages, fees, and selling price. So at buyandsellabusiness.com, a real value proposition is to cut this time and cost by putting in the upfront work to attract and consolidate opportunities and engage buyers and sellers in one convenient marketplace. And we really do this by leveraging and creating strong technology, building a strong brand, and growing a strong culture and community that believes in the power of entrepreneurship and business ownership. Entrepreneurship through acquisition is challenging, but it's also rewarding. And I'm really glad to see you all listening here on Zoom and Twitter Spaces. So next here, my last little portion here before I hand this off to Mike is, why do businesses fail after being acquired? We've ran, tons of workshops, and to date, we've always been laser focused on, the success of our connections, right? So, of those connections, which lead to a successful transaction, but we've never questioned, okay, once that transaction's over, does that business fail or do they succeed? And that was brought up at one of our last workshops, right? One of the attendees really didn't want to know the success of our connections. They wanted to know, if I buy a business on your platform 6 months later, what's the success or failure rate? And that got us really curious because we never really considered that. So what we did is we as any great organization would do, we did a deep dive and did some research on reasons why businesses fail after being acquired. And we did some deep research, and we started with, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. They basically lay out the foundation saying that, 20% of businesses don't survive their first year. And that goes up about 50% in the fifth year. And while, a ton of people are thinking they're failing because they're running out of money, a survey from Fortune actually confirms that the same percentage of businesses are failing because they have the wrong people running them. So, if we want to really know how many profitable businesses fail after they're sold, we'll have a tough time finding that out. But there may be truth to the widespread belief that, buying a business is easier than starting one from scratch. But that doesn't mean it's easy, right? The Harvard Business Review estimated that between 70 to 90% of mergers and acquisitions of larger and medium-sized businesses fail. And we could assume this is similar for the micro market. So that could be our assumption. But, we always like to say that doesn't have to be your scenario. So like I said, we put in research to identify 7 consistent reasons why these small businesses are failing after a sale. And the first one is, they've created dependent businesses, right? So the business owner is really dependent, or the former business owner is really dependent on the business. That business is really structured in a way that that business owner is basically, or that business is basically revolved around that one person or their skills or responsibilities. And those skills and responsibilities cannot easily be taught or transferred to someone who isn't intimately familiar with that business. So that was, one reason. The next reason was the new owner didn't uncover the skeletons in the closet. They failed to sign an indemnity clause in their contract that would keep the former business owner on the hook for problems that come to light after the deal has closed. Next, the new owner fell in love with the numbers. When businesses go up for sale, the selling party really has an incentive to make the cash flow look as strong as possible. But even the smoothest transitions involve some sort of disruption, which means new owners frequently run into cash flow issues in the early days. The next is the new owner failed to do their due diligence. Pretty simple as that. For example, they didn't request audited financial statements, which in my opinion are a must in every transaction. Next, the new owner led with their heart. So this is when buyers make that quick or emotionally motivated purchase. They usually fail to conduct the proper research and analysis of the business's long-term prospects, and whether they're the right person to steer it or not. So we found out through our research is, and what we're always recommending buyers is, you need to have a sober second thought, because it's critical, right? You don't want to have an emotionally motivated purchase. The next is the new owner thought it would be easy. Like we said before, buying a business does mitigate some risk for starting a business from scratch. However, it's not any easier. It still comes, with emotional and physical and financial sacrifices. So you need to be realistic with your expectations and goals. And the last is the new owner didn't have the skill set required. And this could range from the obvious, trying to run a restaurant without retaining or being a chef, or to the less obvious. However, soft skills such as management training, and other sort of skills are definitely just as important and needed, and should be considered when you're looking at buying a specific business. Now, with that said, I'm going to pass it on to Mike. He's going to do his portion of the presentation. Really excited to hear what he has to say. Mike, I'm going to unmute you now.
Excellent, Nunzio. Thank you so much. Great information. I hope people were rapidly taking notes as you went through that. So let me go ahead and dive in right away. My focus today is going to be on 3 simple questions and the secret for successful small business buying. And when I talk about and use the word simple, I use it for a reason. When I first got to the place where I was ready to explore selling my first business, and subsequently when I was looking at buying businesses, I often got overwhelmed by the complexity. It is it's an environment where it is so easy to get to chase a rabbit down a rabbit hole relative to risk and information and technicalities. There's a lot of stuff out there, and there's a lot of really important stuff out there. Nunzio referenced the importance of getting expert advice from accountants and attorneys and the like, and I absolutely echo that. But here's the deal. When somebody goes to sell a small business, or when someone goes to buy a small business, what usually destroys that opportunity is something simple. And so the exercise that we went through at Exit Oasis, when we started looking at this space, was one of eliminating things from the table. How far can we break this down to get to a place where we've eliminated as much minor complexity as we can, so we can focus on the simple and important. Next slide, Nunzio. So again, don't get overwhelmed by the complexity. Focus on 3 simple questions. And what I wanted to mention is that I'm doing this as a coach, but I'm also still out there looking for businesses to buy. Last evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table of a small business owner who's interested in selling his business. And I'm interested as a potential buyer. And we're going through that same dance that all of you are going through right now. So I'm going to use that one as a little bit of an example as we go through this. So let's go to the first question. So the first question, the mantra in your head that you have to ask when you're evaluating a business is, are the results desirable? And that can seem like a very simple question, and it is by design, because it's really, really easy for us to get caught up in variations on this question. You notice that the question isn't, is the brand desirable? It isn't, is the product desirable? The question is are the results desirable? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what you are going to do as a small business owner is benefit or get hurt by the results of the business. Nunzio mentioned a couple times a very important point that one of the benefits of acquisition is that you get to buy a going concern. You get to buy a business that's tested the market already. But here's the problem with that theory is that I meet a lot of business owners who acquired a business and say, I don't understand why it's not working. And I said, well, what was it doing when you bought it? And the reality is that the results sucked then too. Sometimes seeing a business listed for sale, sometimes a business that's been running for 4 years, all that does is give you proof that the idea is not working. So we look at the results that the business is generating, and we look at two primary areas. Next slide there, Nunzio. Okay, so the first area that we look at is seller's discretionary earnings. Now, the term is one of those that can feel complex, but let's take it word by word. Seller's discretionary earnings is exactly that. That is the free cash flow generated by the business that you as the owner will be able to use for your own purposes. That might be to pay your rent and buy groceries. That might be to pay the loan on the business. Those are the funds that the business generates that you get to use. The technical formula is EBITDA, or earnings before interest, depreciation, taxes, and amortization, plus a single owner's salary. I am not going to spend the time on this term today to give you the understanding you need to have about it, but I will say this much. If you don't have a strong working definition of seller's discretionary earnings in your head, then you need to stop doing everything else that you're doing relative to looking for a business until you do. In my opinion, this is the single most important term in buying a business. It's understanding what seller's discretionary earnings is and how you look at a business to determine what that number is. So again, are the results desirable? The first target is seller's discretionary earnings. Next point. Okay, the second element of desirability is the owner's job. What does it look like to be the owner of this business? And here's the reality. If their job sucks, why would you pay them for the opportunity to do that? And this is where one of the key elements of buying a business comes into play. Okay, so if we are desirous of being a small business owner, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you'd better have a little bit of ego going, right? I mean, we need a healthy ego to be able to roll the dice on this kind of opportunity. And that's a good and healthy thing. But sometimes we as potential buyers can look at how an owner is doing the job now and say, well, hey, I can do it much better than they can. And you know what? A lot of times that's true. But we've got to be pragmatic about it. If you're looking at a business for sale that the owner has owned for 15 years, and you're going to walk through the door and assume that in year one, you're going to be better at that job than they are, that's a challenge, right? That's a problem. There's always a learning curve in buying a business. So if you look at how they're doing their job, do they have to work 18 hours a day for miserable pay with people that make them incredibly unhappy to create the seller's discretionary earnings they do? That's a cost you have to count relative to the desirability of the results. Because again, you're not just buying a business, you are buying a lifestyle. And if that lifestyle requires you, Nunzio talked about a taxi service. I worked with a small business owner who owned a taxi service, and the problem for her was that she was the only one that was willing to do the dispatcher job at from 2 to 6 a.m. in the morning. So that part of her life made her very unhappy, but the reality was is it was a job she found it very difficult to hire for. And so again, two key factors: seller's discretionary earnings, the owner's job. That's what your life is going to look like as you learn the work, as you learn the business, and as you start to improve it and get it better. So are the results desirable? That is our key question. Now, my preference and the way I usually do this is to open for questions, but we're going through. So let's jump to the next slide, Nunzio. Here's the next of the three simple questions. Can you duplicate those results? Okay, so we passed the first test. We find a business that's generating a decent return. The job of the owner doesn't seem too bad. They're working, a regular full-time job, or maybe they're even doing full-time owner, hours, which is, I don't know, 50, 60 hours a week. Now the question becomes, can you duplicate the results? Or, as Nunzio mentioned earlier, are those results dependent on the owner? What are the factors that we look at with that? Next slide. First, we look at is, do they have a team? Okay. Do the results come from individuals doing jobs that are going to keep doing those jobs after you buy the business? This is one that can be difficult to evaluate from a distance from the outside, right? Because we can look and the owner says, listen, I'm only working 40 hours a week at this place. I've got a team of 7 people. They're doing all the work. That feels good. That's the way it should look. And then as we dig a little deeper, we understand that the owner is the only person that has contact with the clients. Everything goes through the owner. They are the relationship. There's never been a sales made that the owner wasn't involved with. There's a level of dependency there. Now, again, as we look at buying a business, just the fact that that reality exists doesn't prohibit the business as a potential target. But now that question of dependability on the existing owner goes higher up on our list. Now, instead of saying, hey, we want to buy the place and see you go, now maybe we need to buy the place and they need to stick around for a year with a consulting contract where we ensure that they transfer those relationships to us over an extended period of time. If, on the other hand, that owner is going on vacation 2 weeks every month and doesn't have to be in the office because there's truly an independent operating team there, now we've got a much stronger measure of the team and the contribution it makes. In addition to the team, do they have systems? Okay, so what is a system? Right. So sometimes in a perfect world, we get that operations manual where everything is spelled out. That's wonderful. Where does that knowledge live? Is it in the head of the owner walking out the door? Is it even in the head of that team or those team members that are staying afterwards? Why is that a problem? Well, sometimes people leave after a business sale. Sometimes they're not there. So again, we want to make sure that we're doubling up on our opportunity to take advantage of the knowledge and the success that this business has replicated. Where's the recipe? What does it look like? Now, I want to make sure that I encourage you to look for systems, but again, it's a sliding scale. I've looked at businesses before and I've asked the owner, do you have any systems here? How do you know to do what you do? And they're like, oh, no, we don't have any systems here. I don't have any book or any operations manual. But then I walk around the shop and I see pieces of paper taped up next to every machine or every station where there's a 17-step walkthrough of what it is that they do when they use that piece of machinery or how this part of the process works. That's a system. Sometimes they're ugly. But again, one of the things that I'll mention later, but will allude to now, I love finding businesses that are broken in ways that I can fix, right? So if I walk through that shop And I see that knowledge there, but it's inefficient or it's not in the best way that it could be. I like that because I know on day 3, I can take all those things off the wall and start creating the systems in a more efficient way. Again, the key here is, did they build systems that you can inherit when you purchase the business? Where does that knowledge live? And that's the second question. Can you duplicate those results? That brings us to our third and final question, which is, can they document the results? And we could spend the next hour and a half with me telling you ridiculous stories about business owners that made claims that turned out to not be true. You can jump to the next slide, Nunzio. And again, this breaks down to a very simple question: is, did they keep clean records? I have had the experience as a buyer where the owner is sitting across the table from me during due diligence and says, "Oh, those tax returns I gave you aren't the actual tax returns." I've had the experience as a potential buyer where I get invited to the owner's condo only to find out after I get there that he wanted to show me the second set of books, right? This stuff happens. Now, I can highlight those pieces, but I want to tell you that for every one of those, there's 10 cases where they're just really bad at keeping records, right? But here's the problem. You as the buyer can only pay for what you can prove. And I can tell you from personal experience that if somebody is willing to be dishonest to the government about their taxes, they're more than willing to be dishonest to you about their financial results and other things. So it's a real simple equation. You don't pay for what you can't prove. That doesn't mean that the business isn't viable or isn't an attractive opportunity, but it means that you can't pay unless you can prove it. That one I talked about earlier, where the owner told me that they weren't real tax records. I ended up buying that business about 9 months later for a third of what my initial offer had been after he lost the business back to the bank and I bought it. So those are opportunities potentially, but the thing that we have to remember as buyers, and it's hard because we get excited, if those other two questions get yeses, are they desirable results? Can I document those results? We get excited when those questions come back as yeses. This has got to be a deal killer for us, or at the very least, a dramatic impact on what we're willing to pay for a business. So that's question number 3. Can they document the results? And that's all about them keeping clean records. Okay, so those are our 3 questions. Are the results desirable? Can they document the results? I'm sorry, can you duplicate the results, and can they document the results? And we'll talk, I'm happy to answer any questions about those when we get to the question. But now I want to tell you that the real secret to finding a great business, and this is something that I'm not just teasing here. I genuinely believe that if you want to be successful at buying a business, that this is the single most important thing that you need to do. Show us the secret, Nunzio. You've got to fall in love with the search process. Now, I understand as I say that how difficult that is to swallow as a potential buyer, because we get into the buy a business process because we want to be business owners. It always makes me really nervous when I meet a business buyer who has a really loud ticking clock. Listen, I took the buyout at work. I've got 4 months of salary, and I'm going to use that time to buy a business. That makes me really, really nervous. Why? Because there is one thing worse in terms of outcomes in this buy a business process. There's one thing worse than not buying a business, and that is buying the wrong business. And the way to combat that, the way to overcome that, is to figure out how to fall in love with the search Fall in love with the process of evaluating the business and asking those key questions. Fall in love with going through the financials and creating the projections and figuring out the valuation that makes sense to you. You've got to get excited about that process. I'm a Warren Buffett fan, and he's very well known for saying that he's going to look at 100 deals before he'll find one that might be potentially interesting. We need, as small business buyers, to hold ourselves accountable to that same level of introspection and examination. And again, I'm not advising you to not jump when the opportunity is right. I've been lucky enough to own a number of businesses over the years, some that I've built from scratch, some that I've bought. I love this process. And when it's time to go, you got to go big and you got to go fast, but you can't do it when there's those screaming voices in the back of your head. The counterpunch to that is that we all know that there's always good reasons not to do something. I alluded to this business last night. I started going through that process with him of asking some of these key questions. Were the results desirable? No, they were not. This guy was doing this job part-time, 30 hours a week, making zero money, right? Could those results be duplicated? Well, almost certainly, because it's almost guaranteed that whoever buys that business is going to continue losing money. But I got to tell you, I thoroughly enjoyed sitting at the kitchen table with him, learning about the business, understanding what he did, how he did it. I was on the phone on the way home talking with some partners. Well, maybe we don't want to do it by purchasing this, but maybe we could do it this way or that way. You got to fall in love with that search, to buy yourself the time and the ability to look and evaluate a business realistically as it relates to how it's going to impact your life. So that's the secret from my perspective. 3 questions, fall in love with the search. Let's get to questions.
Mike, that was so powerful. Thank you so much. My key takeaways, you're buying a lifestyle. It's okay to find a broken business that you can fix, because that's how you create value. Pay for what they can prove as a seller. And then fall in love with the search process, right? There's one thing that's worse than buying a business. It's buying the wrong business. So thank you so much, Mike, for that. I'm going to end it off with a couple more slides, and then we'll enter the Q&A here. So, since our inception, we've always recognized the position we're in as an internet business and the power of data, especially data that is high quality, timely, and reliable. Unfortunately, in the private sector, such as the business for sale micro market, data is limited and rarely presented in a safe way. And we want to change that. And we believe, the right data can really improve people's lives by ensuring they make informed decisions around buying, selling, or even growing businesses. To us, the bottom line is data equals knowledge. So for the past 7 years, we've been diligently collecting, managing, and organizing data while taking privacy, security, and reliability safeguards seriously in order to present the numbers behind the business for sale micro market. With that said, I want to present some data that aims to empower and guide buyers and sellers the right way. So this is data stories. Up to the left, what you'll see is a view of our active users, where they're from. We're super excited to empower over 40,000 and growing. I think it paints a powerful picture about how far-reaching our marketplace is. Next, to the top right, you'll see our average connection price and our average listing price. Right now, there is a buyer premium, meaning that buyers are connecting with higher price listings. And we really think that better financing options and great interest rates are really driving this. Then we'll see the number of e-commerce and home-based listing opportunities on our platform. Since COVID, this has increased tremendously, actually. Lastly, you'll see that we've saved close to 900 businesses and 9,000 jobs. And this is one metric that really makes us smile. the local businesses are the fabric of our economy, so we want to see them sell and thrive versus shutting down, and that's what's really been pushing us forward through this entire pandemic. So now what I like to end it off with is just believing in the possibilities. I came across a great article that Mike shared on LinkedIn the other day called M&A porn. And it talks about, looking at these outliers and these possibilities. I think it's okay to look at these outliers and possibilities, but at the same time, be realistic with your own goals and objectives in lives. But this is really to showcase, how lucrative entrepreneurship through acquisition could truly be. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of people think that the traditional story of entrepreneurship is the only way to create a lucrative and powerful and meaningful business that adds value to the world. But it's just not true. And these are some examples, right, of some high profile, examples of how lucrative entrepreneurship through acquisition can be. The top left, we see Ronald Joyce. He bought a Tim Hortons store in the 1960s after spotting a for sale sign in the window. You have in the middle here Muhammad Fahi. In 2006, he purchased a nearly bankrupt restaurant and transformed it into the fastest growing Middle Eastern halal restaurant chain in North America. Once again, I think that brings up what Mike mentioned about finding a broken business and making it better or fixing it where you can in order to create that value. Last, you see a very popular story, and that's the Ray Kroc story in 1954, how he saw McDonald's a better vision for a restaurant and turned it into a global empire. So I think, like I said, success doesn't only come to entrepreneurs that start a business from scratch, but massive success can come to entrepreneurs that search and seek opportunities that they truly believe they can grow into something even better. Like we always like to say, you don't need to start a business to own one. And I truly believe, you're all here for that reason. And I want to thank you all for being here. I really want to thank Mike as well for being here as we spread this message that you don't need to start a business to own one. So yeah, that's our workshop. Really, really appreciate everyone listening in on Zoom or Twitter Spaces. But now I'd like to open it up for some questions. You can do that by simply, there's a raise hand button in the participant panel. As soon as you raise your hand, I could mute you and you could ask your question. So we'll get some questions now. Looking forward to it. All right. It looks like no questions. So that's either a good or bad thing. A good thing, meaning you found all your answers, or a bad thing, we didn't inspire you with any questions. But it's okay. At the end of the day, you have our email addresses here. So if you wanted to ask a question that's a little bit more private, please feel free to reach out to myself or Mike. We'd be happy to connect with you after this is all done. I do want to say thank you once again. We will actually be taking a break until September. So this was our last workshop. Our goal through the summer months is really to improve this workshop and potentially even find a better platform than Zoom. I don't know if that exists, but if anyone does know a better platform for this type of workshop, please let us know. We're always looking to improve and make sure that our listeners have the most value. But at the end, after this, you'll be getting an email from us asking for that feedback. So please let us know, the good, the bad, how we can improve. But in the meantime, please email us, stay connected with us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, pretty much everywhere on social media. With that said, thanks, Mike. I don't know if you want to have any closing comments, but I'll unmute you now.
Nunzio, thank you again for the opportunity. And just saying to those that are still with us, go out and buy a business. I'm a huge advocate of the lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's not easy, and it's incredibly rewarding, both from a growth and opportunity perspective. So keep doing what you're doing. There are businesses out there worth buying, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks so much, Mike. Thanks all. Have a good Friday. Have a good weekend ahead. Talk to you soon. Bye.